Hi, this is John Wren, and this is the Startup Show. We're here each Friday at noon, Mountain Daylight Time, and we talk about startup. My name's John Wren. I've been working with startups for a long time, really since I was 2 years old. My dad was a successful entrepreneur, and I got to be right with him while he built his successful business and work in it, and it was a great education. Every night at the dinner table, sort of like going to a business seminar. And, I've gotten education, I've done independent learning, I've had experience, I've done consulting, I've started firms of my own. And that's what we talk about is how do you start a new business or a project or a campaign or a new career? How do you get going? We've got the Small Business Chamber of Commerce Startup Method. We'll talk with you about that in just a bit. And what we're going to be doing each week here now to sort of make this even more helpful to try to stem the tide of the decline in the rate of startups. If we are successful, I think you'll see it show up in the statistics. That's what we're going to start with today, is talking about the Forbes Magazine article that just is out. The headline is why the decline in entrepreneurship. And they say that since 1990, there have been fewer and fewer and fewer new businesses in the business census that they do. It's down sharply. And they have a reason in the article that they talk about that's being, I guess, promoted by the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. Marion Kauffman started Marion Labs. His nutritional supplement company made a lot of money, started out of the trunk of his car, and ended up being able to buy the baseball team there in Kansas City. He just made a lot of money, passed away, and his widow, wanting to do good for the world, started the Kauffman Foundation and has put a lot of money into trying to help startups. And now I believe she's passed away, and it's kind of, you wouldn't say a ship without a rudder, but I don't know, you might say a ship without a rudder. But even when the widow was starting it, he would have turned over in his grave if he would have seen what they were talking about. Now this report comes out, startups down since 1990, which is coincidentally about when the Kauffman Foundation started. And so what the Kauffman Foundation says is, we ought to look at what we're doing with debt kids are graduating with. They graduate, they owe a lot of money, and so naturally they're not going to be as inclined to start a business for themselves. Well, you could make just the opposite argument. If they have a lot of debt, they're not going to be able to just take a normal corporate entry-level job, and it very likely might help the rate of startup. So maybe if it wasn't for this debt, startup would even be further off the charts. Now, Dr. Amar Bhide and I have been saying this for over 20 years, that where did it start? I'll tell you where the problem is. We've been talking about for a long time. Kauffman Foundation still was not recognizing it. And they've really done a great job, as one way of looking at it, at promoting the idea of teaching entrepreneurship on college campuses across the country. I went to graduate business school before Inc. magazine. And before Inc. magazine, there just wasn't a whole lot of, it wasn't like it is today. Now, if you Google startup entrepreneurship, you get lots of listings. Now, part of that's Google. We didn't have Google back then, but still we had the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. And, I did a research report on what are we telling entrepreneurs about starting their own business. And before Inc. magazine, we weren't telling them very much. And now there's book after book after book, magazines, articles, just talks galore. And it seems, well, it doesn't seem, it's an absolute fact that the more we're talking about startup, the fewer startups actually get started. And that's what this Forbes Magazine article looks at, that we're really falling way down as far as how it used to be. I guess, it used to be about 1 million startups a year. We're about half that now, about half the number of startups. And if you have, let's say, wild animals, and all of a sudden the herd drops by half, you're concerned. And the entrepreneur is becoming an endangered species. Now, what's the reason? The reason started in 1953. What happened in 1953? The Small Business Administration. And ever since, and especially since 1990, when the widow Kaufman started pushing a lot of money into the encouragement of this, is college campuses have picked up on the SBA approach, and it's been a funding decision. Now, it's sort of understandable that you don't want to pour a lot of money into something that you don't know what's going to happen. To just hand out money to people and expect them to go start a business is not very reasonable. As a matter of fact, it's a crazy idea. So if you're going to give a lot of government money out, maybe you do want plans. But if market research and careful plans, like I was taught to write in graduate business school, if that really improved entrepreneurial success, we wouldn't have a market economy, we'd have a planned economy. And you'd do your research, write your plan, get the government approval. It's getting to be pretty close to that right now, unless it's your own money. But you know what? That's the way it's always been. What Dr. Bhide's research indicated is what I had discovered on my own, and he confirmed what I was talking about back then. I was going to stop talking about it. This was a couple of decades ago. I was going to stop talking about startup unless I could find something in the literature that research that supported my point of view, because I was saying successful businesses don't write business plans, and the whole little world of startup, people that worked with startups back then would just shake their heads and say, oh yeah, no, you have to write a business plan. Well, if you're selling business plans, that's how the world looks to you. And if you're at SBA, that's the way the world looks, because of the way the SBA was started. 1953, that summer, Dwight Eisenhower was looking at ways that the economy could get a boost. There were a lot of veterans that had veterans financing. They'd gone to college and they bought houses. They could free up the money from the houses if they could take veterans' money and use it to build more houses, get them financing. And so veterans' home loans were a new idea back then. And as they met here in Denver, and I actually know someone that observed these meetings, as they met here in Denver, what they discovered was that some veterans, instead of wanting to build a house, wanted to start a business. So they applied their thinking of the Veterans Home Loan Program to business startup. And you can't really blame them for doing it that way. In 1910, and this is the other source of the problem, way before the SBA, in 1910, Harvard issued the first MBA degree. 1910, Harvard started, and the reason they were being manufacturing MBAs was the need for middle management. There were these very large corporations that needed management to take over responsible positions, and they were training them to do that in their MBA program, and that's pretty much what all MBA programs did. University of Denver offered one of the first business degrees, and whether it was an undergraduate degree or the graduate MBA, was really geared towards large enterprises. And the startup is an entirely different animal than the large enterprise, but that's what they looked at in 1953, was this experience in business schools. They looked at what you need to build a house. You need a piece of land and blueprints, and you get the loan approved and you build it to those specifications, but businesses don't start that way. And what caused this country to flourish for so many years was the way entrepreneurs do it, is they just go out and do it. They get up in the morning, they have an idea, one thing leads to another. John Brackney, we have speakers come into the little startup workshops we do, and John came to one of them. He said, what do you need to start a business? You need a customer. Absolutely, John, you hit it right on the head. I think he thought I was selling business plans because he was sort of surprised when I said, that's exactly what we're saying here, John. But he had seen it he was head of the most successful for small and big businesses while he was in charge of it. The best chamberofcommerce.com is their URL, and it really was. He was in the corner of business. Some chamber people never really been in business, and they run it like part of the government. And but John didn't do that. He was very entrepreneurial, and he knew that what you needed to start a new business was a customer. And that's exactly right. That's what Dr. Bhide had found in his research. He'd sent students out to talk to the founders of successful businesses that had hit the Inc. 500. You can argue with that as a definition of success, but that's what he looked at. And what he found is that almost no business that did formal market research, formal strategic planning before their first customer, you know, if you do those things, it's almost a guarantee you're not going to be successful. But that's what we propagate in business schools. Business plan competitions. CPA firms, you know, sponsor the outstanding new business, and they look at things like the business plan. They have, you know, angel summits, and they have business plan competitions at those to get the word out to venture capitalists. But using other people's money before your first customer, you know, Mark Cuban says, if you start a business with borrowed money, you're crazy. And he's right, and he knows because he's done it. And when you're bootstrapping, when you have just barely enough money, makes you look at the market a little bit more carefully. And there are businesses now that start with millions of dollars and just flush it all down the toilet. It's all gone, and they all go home. And that doesn't happen when it's some individual's money on a small scale, and they change, how they call it, pivot. Lean startup is a step in the right direction. But these are all reasons that businesses are not starting to the extent that they were in the past. It's not the student loans. Now that debt is a bad thing. I don't like the idea that the students graduate with that much debt. But the ones that start a business of their own are going to get that loan paid back just a little bit quicker than the guy that goes to work for the corporation and is in his cubicle for his career, and he may graduate and still have that student debt. So to blame it on the student debt, I think, is not the right way to look at this. I don't think it's helpful to the kids that have student debt, unless they're getting ready to pay off all the student debt. You know, and that could be, I guess, one of the presidential candidates is promising. How I don't think it can ever come about. I think they're going to disappoint a lot of kids when that doesn't happen. You know, not only free tuition, but we're going to pay off everybody's student debt. I just don't see how that is even possible, and it might not even be good. You know, if a student debt gets paid off, what's going to happen? You know, we just don't know. There are too many unknowns, and that's true in business. Now, if everything was predictable, we'd do market research and we'd write plans. And the best book about this, you know, I have my little, more of a pamphlet than a book. You can go on Amazon and search on John Wren, Daring Mighty Things, and you'll see it there. Yeah, but the best book, other than my little Daring Mighty Things, which is more of a pamphlet than a book, is Harvard Business Review Press, Just Start, just J-U-S-T, Start. And it was written by the president of Babson College, ranked every year #1 in entrepreneurship. And he left Babson just after it was published. And I think it might be because it's not what they actually teach at Babson. I'm not sure of that. But, you know, what I do know is that the book just flopped. And that was too bad, because I think it really is a great book to crystallize this idea that the way a business gets started is you just start. You have a life experience that's brought you to where you are now. You've had some sort of an idea. Now, this is not a startup that comes out of library research. This is a business that comes out of your life experience. And we all have life experience, but on the job or in our maybe fishing's our hobby, and we get into outdoor equipment or something like that. But we see a need in the marketplace, and we know it because it affects us directly. And we decide, let's do it. And now what we're teaching people to do now is that once you're right there at that takeoff place, instead of going and getting customers, turning it into cash as quick as you can, we start researching it. Go out and ask everybody you know, so do you think this is a good idea? And listen to them and change your idea based on that. Let me tell you, asking friends, one of two things happens, and they're both bad. One may be worse than the other. I'm not sure, though. They're both really bad. Friends, to save you from injury, especially parents, will discourage you from starting. And so they'll disparage your idea. You got to look at that, blah, 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 blah. Or the other thing that friends will do is encourage you. Oh, that is a wonderful idea. Or strangers especially will do this. Oh, yes, that looks like a winner. And they think they're doing you a favor, but they're really not. And you go back to those same people after you've done whatever it is they think is going to be such a great idea, you actually try to sell them. Just very often they say, well, yeah, no, not that I'd actually want one myself. I just thought other people might want it. So the question, theoretically, would you buy this, is a totally different question than, here is this, will you buy it now? And getting the cash. And that's what successful entrepreneurs do. And just start Harvard Business Review Press. I really recommend the book very, very highly. Read that book. And Forbes Magazine should take another look at it too, in light of the decline in startups, because that's where it's coming from. Now we have our Small Business Chamber of Commerce Soulful Startup Method, 4 practices. And we're going to start making those 4 practices the focus of each show. And the practices, and we'll be starting this next week. The first practice we'll look at is how do we recuperate, reload, get back on our feet, recover, whatever way we want to look at it, because we will get knocked down. And resilience is a practice. Football teams know this. You have to practice getting up. And in business, we just very often forget it. But that is going to be one of the practices that we focus on. Bounce, maybe is what we'll call it. Resilience. And we have a meeting where, especially if you're really beat up, and it's more than just take a deep breath, and you're really, like the bullfighter that gets gored, he doesn't just do it through positive thinking. He has to have some medical assistance. Now, we're not going to give medical assistance, and we're not even giving advice, but we are going to connect people that have gone through recovery of various kinds, and they'll talk about how they did it. And we'll tell you more about that next week. But recovery, that's one of the practices. Bounce. Resilience, grit. How do you get gritty? The next practice is imagination. Look around you. Everything you see started as someone's idea. And imagination is critical to success. Now, you can take this too far and it becomes magical thinking. This crazy, crazy idea of whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. I heard Walt Disney say that. And I'm sure he read it right out of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. If you look at Napoleon Hill's life, that book took off. It was the right book at the right time. He'd done all this research for Carnegie. He'd done this massive work for Carnegie. Nobody was interested. He's starving to death. And he gets this inspiration. Now, inspiration, it's not always a good spirit. I think he got an inspiration from a bad spirit. I think whenever we think, it's just whatever we believe. We create our own reality. This is the kind of crazy thinking that I've had experience with people that have done this, and it is not edifying what happens. Now, sometimes it works, and then they'll hold those people up as a big success and get other people to hold their breath and take the jump. But imagination alone is not enough. That's one of the practices, though, because it is necessary. It's not sufficient. So imagination, 1 week each month, we'll be looking at imagination and having some people here on the show that will share some of their experience with imagination. But after we imagine things, what do we have to do? We have to think. Think, think, think. And critical thinking is a very important skill. Now, for imagination, we have a free weekly meeting here in Denver that we'd like to help spread across the country. It seems to help people have more imagination when they're in a tough spot, especially. Get out of the groove and look at things from a little different perspective and then go on their way. We say if people are successful, they'll be too busy to come back the next week. And all we do is focus on green light thinking and imagination, and we call it the Idea Cafe. And you can join me each Friday after these shows at the Lodo, lower downtown, Lodo Panera Bread at 4:30, and I'll be there, and for an hour and a half, we'll share startup experience. We'll do brainstorming, exchange ideas. If you work with startups, we welcome you. Come on down. But we'd like to help you start your own Idea Cafe in conjunction with your own local Chamber of Commerce. So if you're traveling through Denver and you want to do a little business here while you're in Denver and headed up to the slopes, we'd love to have you come by some Friday afternoon, 4:30. It's free and open to everybody. Walk-ins are welcome, or you can find out about it on our website, smallbizchamber.org. So that's green light thinking. That's the Idea Cafe. Then the red light thinking, critical thinking, the meeting that we suggest for that is Socrates Cafe. If you just Google Socrates Cafe, they're all over the country already. And now this isn't a class in critical thinking. This is going in and you're having a place where you can actually have the experience of critical thinking and get feedback from the group. Now, everybody does them in a little bit different way. Chris Phillips has his own ideas and it's a bit more structured. I have my own ideas and, maybe it's even more structured. I don't know. That's what I do each week is I have one that I call an instructed Socrates Cafe. And I'd love to have you join me for that. We have one Friday nights. It's kind of a free-for-all, and I love going. It's a lot of fun. Interesting people show up. But the general format for all of these is we pick a topic. We don't announce the topic in advance. We all don't load up and do a paper. We come ready for anything. We might have a topic on our mind. We've been reading something. But the group picks the topic, and then we all share our opinions and ask each other questions. And it's a lot of fun. So tonight, same place as Idea Cafe at Lodo Panera Bread. It's at 6 o'clock, right after the Idea Cafe. And then tomorrow, University of Denver in the current periodicals, there's a Socrates Cafe that I lead that's more of a structured, I call it the instructed Socrates Cafe. And love to have you join us for either or both. And if you just Google Socrates Cafe, you should be able to get it, or give us a call, 303-861-1447. So we recover, we imagine, we think, and then we do. And doing, learning, the best learning experience is doing something. And so we call it learning, but it's really the do phase. Selling is pay-as-you-go market research. So we go out, and we're not just talking to customers theoretically. We go out selling new customers. That's the way new businesses almost always do it. Now, we may talk to some, but we're not saying theoretically. We're not saying, hey, this may come someday. We're saying, I'm opening this. Here's what I have. I wanted you to know about it. When we're ready to ship, I'm going to be back. And you're pursuing the sale. You're not just doing theoretical research. So thinking leads to learning. And these all kind of mush together. It's not, so now at the Idea Cafe, we try to make it strictly the green light thinking. But you go to the Socrates Cafe, the green light thinking gets a little bit mixed in with the critical thinking. And if you go too far with that, it ends up being just fantasy. And, and some people enjoy that. It may exercise their mind. But the Socrates Cafe is a little bit like shadow boxing. And I love to do it each week. Now, all of these methods also apply to not only business startup, but career startup. You know, one way of looking at it, getting a new job or starting a business, the only difference is the financing arrangements. In a way, you get an idea, you go out and you pursue it, and you take the job, and now you're working to help someone achieve their idea that's congruent with your ideas. So the financing arrangement is different, but what businesses generally are very attracted to, unless they're looking for robots, and some do, and they'll be replaced with robots pretty soon, because that's becoming more and more common. I don't think we're ever going to get to the driverless car. We'll see if I'm wrong about that, but at some point it's going to be the emperor wearing no clothes. I think they're looking at driverless clothes to keep the stock market up. I think people are looking at that and factoring that in and thinking, man, this is just, but it seems like an awfully big leap from my computer, which I just struggle with, to the thing's going to drive a car. I'll believe it when I see it, but maybe I'm being cynical. We'll see. Well, those are the things we're going to talk about each week on the show: recovery, imagination, thinking, learning. And learning is adult self-directed learning. And the group for that we really encourage people, you may be in something like this right now, is some small group where you help each other learn. Could be you all read the same book, a book discussion group. I've been a great books discussion leader, and those are fine. Those are good. But what I'm a big believer in is an adult self-directed learning group where each individual is studying what they are really interested in and then sharing it with the group as a way to further their own learning on that topic. The group learns when you present, and you learn even more when you present. And so at each meeting, it goes around the table and you share what you've been learning, and then half the meeting is taking turns presenting in a more extended way. That's what Ben Franklin's group did back starting in 1727. I think it was Franklin's best invention. If you read his autobiography, he talks about it a lot in there. And you can, if you just Google how to start a Franklin circle, pretty much everything I know about how to start a Franklin circle is right there. So just start it on your own, or I'm always starting new ones, and give me a call and I'll try to get you into a group that might fit your needs. And I'm also very glad, now I haven't even checked the, if you tweeted me, I am apologizing because I haven't even looked at tweets yet, but they will be answered next week. Any tweet you send to @IdeaCafe, IDEACAFE, @IdeaCafe, the tweets that go to that, will answer them the next week, okay? And it may not happen during the show because I try to focus on this and the time just flies by. The half hour is almost over. We've been working on some political things, more to come. We had this great write-up in the Villager newspaper. Can you see that green area there? That's talking about new caucus network for communications and education being formed. And the Save the Caucus, the political group, is going to become independent. And that's political. This new group may stay part of what we're doing here. We're going to have each person in their own neighborhood try to do something to make it more of a neighborhood before the caucus next year, and it be of service to both major political parties, and do civic education as long as with possibly other education. A working name for it is the Caucus Corps, like Peace Corps. So we're going to look for young people that go into a precinct, and just like the Peace Corps goes into some remote village, they look for an opportunity to help the villagers improve their life. The young person will look for ways to improve the neighborhood, to help neighbors here and in your own neighborhood. It won't just be college kids coming in as outsiders, but also people in place that want to help us with this. Well, you know, it's a work in process. I think we're still in the green light thinking part. We're doing some critical thinking, but we're going to be out doing it very shortly. But that is non-political. We won't do any lobbying. We'll just be doing civic education. And we got a really nice write-up in the Villager. So some volunteers are starting to get interested, and we look forward to keeping you informed here of what we're doing with that. But this would not be a political show quite so much, except that is a good way to network, and we'll continue talking about that. But we're going to have a separate show eventually for the political side of things. And what we're going to focus here on the startup is this Small Business Chamber of Commerce Startup Method. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And at the end of every show, I like to remind you and to remind myself that this life is very short. So this is John Wren saying, let's go get started. Hope to see you next week. Thanks for watching.